Hi, I'm James Rich. I'm with Adams Mill Inc. I've been a volunteer out here since 2009. Adams Mill Inc. bought this in 2011, but we started volunteering before we bought it. And we bought the collateral first, and then we ended up getting a loan to purchase the mill. And we're a non-profit. We're all donation. We're all volunteer. The mill was built. This particular mill was built in 1845 to about 1848. Took them 3 years. There was another mill here previously that was built in 1835. The machinist, his name was Samuel Weaver. He took that apart and he went ahead and moved it down to where Cutler is now and ran that for 25 years until a man from Iowa bought it, took it out to Iowa in 1873, right about the time Cutler was founded. But this mill, John Adams came out here. Basically the Michigan Road came through about 1832. John Adams was here, we think, 1831. Bought his land, found the oxbow, set up a sawmill. The sawmill was on the river, and then he sawed, there's a yellow house here on the property. Part of that was 1831. And then across the road is the White House. They lived there in 1836, and both those houses have been built around since then. Much of the property is still here, the original. This was built, like I said, in 1845, so he was probably making deals with all the farmers because it was all timber out here, and the farmers were trying to get rid of their forest to be able to farm it. So I'm sure he was making deals with timber. It probably took him 10 years to get all he needed for this massive barn. It doesn't do it justice being down in the valley here, but it's basically, if you count the basement, there's 5 stories of this building. Inside the mill, as you enter, before you entered, actually there was grain weights out here on the ground. Used to drop your grain down. And originally it was just a mill where you waited for your own grain, which would be oats or corn or wheat. And so it wasn't until later, probably after the Civil War, it became a merchant mill where you would come in and you would get so much grain for what you brought in from either flour bags or corn mill. And the miller got a toll. He got so much of the weight, and that's how he got paid. But also he got paid, he would sell animal feed. It's part of the shorts that was back to the farmer, so he made money 2 different ways. And so there was a lot of business here over the years. There were several owners. The last one that did the operation, his name was Claude Sheets. He bought it in 1940. It was probably closed because of the Great Depression. And his brother Dewey Sheets told him if he bought this, he would get it running. Dewey was a millwright and had the means to do it, and so those 2 brothers got this mill running, and it ran for production until about 1951. At that point, it became a historical museum where Claude started bringing in antiques. And there are still antiques here. Some of them were sold off by a previous owner in the 80s, but there are still some antiques from Claude Sheets' generation. And so we're just the next caretakers of this mill. Like I said, we're all donation, we're all volunteers out here. And that's all I look at, we're just the next caretakers. And it's 2022. So it's going to be some point where this mill is going to be more of a historical museum than it was actually in operations. It still ran for about 100 years, so we got some time before that happens. But it won't be long. But this will be more of a museum than it was actually a grist mill. There's a barrel out here, came from Beebe, Indiana. That was one of the things Claude brought up. We don't know if it was for water. I know Beebe, Indiana was known for wine. And there's just been things like this scoop shovel here, and there's just different antiques, a John Deere tractor. There's no farm wagon out here. The porch was put on, we think, when Claude Sheets built it. There's pictures in here where there wasn't a porch. And we ended up putting the columns in here about, I don't know, 8 years ago to support it. We didn't want it falling. So that's why we did that. So there's been some changes. We try to keep the integrity of the building. And We're going to have some foundation work on it before we get the water going again. We won't have the dam running. We'll probably do some kind of water flow, but it won't be a dam access. But our goal is to get the water going at some point. But we got to have foundation work, and we got to have some drainage tiles put in. The spring, there was a flood in 2003, I believe, and that's when the spring changed in here, and so water is going underneath the building and it's causing issues. So we've had it inspected and we've had an assessment done on what needs to be done, and we're going to do that even if we have to go out and raise money as far as a loan, because it's too important. We're not going to let this building go. So we're always looking for donations too if you're interested in doing that. We're a 501c3, so it would be a tax write-off if you were interested. John Adams, like I said, he brought 3 men with him. First he came here and he had a man to dig the mill race. It was a preacher and his boy, and they used oxen and a wooden scoop. They scooped up the mill race from the Wildcat and went all the way down. It actually goes under where the building is and comes out. It's an oxbow river. It goes back towards itself. So he did that first, and then set up the sawmill, and then that's when he set up his grist mills, his flour mills. And if you come inside, one of the first things we did as Adams Mill Inc. is we saved some of these flour bags. Anything that was different. There's a snowflake flour bag, there's a good luck one, there's Charles Adams, which was John Adams' grandson. He left here in 1910, so that bag is at least that old. And then there's some other ones that were all Cutler here, the old water. John Pritch was a miller here in the 20s and teens. He had a corn mill. The wedding cake, that was what they were named for, and the Good Luck Wildcat Mill is what. But there's different names, and we don't have all the bags. If we find a different one, we'll add that. We put them in museum glass and archival paper to preserve them. One of the things we did to honor the sawmill is up here on the wall as you enter, there's a big old crosscut saw, and we put up there Adams Mill the year it was built, and then we put the covered bridge the year it was built. And this happens to be the 150th anniversary of the covered bridge. So in September we're going to have a little festival at the end of the month to commemorate the building of that covered bridge 150 years ago. And at some point, 1845, we're not, way far away. We're 20-some years away from the 200th anniversary of the mill, of this particular mill. So those are things in the future that we'll look forward to as a group. The miller's office, this is where coming into this deal. Supposedly this is the original desk. Right now we got different pictures and paintings of the mill in here. There was a covered bridge here in the corner. That was the old, they call it no bridge now. There was another covered bridge down by Highway 75 that went across the creek there. It was torn down in the 1950s. And there's just different pictures here, and there's more flour bags here. Pictures of weddings, things like that. And this is kind of a commemorative to the mill. People donate things. Got a period clock that's wooden movement, probably from the 1850s era. We still use the knob and tune. We're going to bypass that, but that's how they put that in when they started electrifying this in 1912.
Oh yeah, that's like the original.
So Johnson family had did that when they owned that, and that's when they set up the electricity to generate electricity, and it ran to Rossville and Sedalia, little towns around here, and the farms. So it was early teens that they had electricity, some of these farm sites. In 1913 there was a bad flood in here. And this is how high the water was in 1913, which that's, what, probably 3 feet.
Yeah.
But the 2003 flood was another 6 inches higher, and that's when the mill quit running.
Oh, yeah.
There was a previous group in here that worked for the previous owner, and it was Friends of the Wildcat. they actually did tours with the mill running. And they did that until about 2005, and then there was a man that, they called him Red. He opened up for tours between 2005 until we got here, 2009. Then we started doing tours before we bought it. So there's been tours going on since, well, basically since Claude Sheets owned this. There's a picture of Claude over here. Claude grew up in Moran, Indiana, and he bought this mill, like I said, in 1940. They got it running by 1942, and his brother Dewey. And he was known for he was a radio operator. He set up all the AM stations in Chicago in the early 1920s, and his love was being on the steamships on the Great Lakes. He was a radio operator there. So when he retired, he bought this and set up and ran it for about, a dozen years, about 10 years, and then he became a museum after that. He said he worked harder at this than he did anywhere in his life, so he was about 55 when he decided he would make this into a museum instead of producing it. He could have converted it, but it would have cost some money. And there's some more pictures up here of the mill, covered bridges, and some more feed sacks from this mill. And then there's all kinds of antiques in the building. The first floor here, basically you have wheelwright equipment back on the back wall. There's just different trade things that people would have donated here. And there's just all kinds of different antiques that come in, people donate. And it's good to take things like that. And on the second floor there's a lot of like cultivators, things that farmers would have had for gardens. There's blacksmith equipment back here. A gentleman was really nice, and he donated this doctor buggy. So there's all kinds of antiques in here. So there's where they made the wheels for wagons back here.
How old is this buggy?
It's probably 100 years old, I don't know. Probably from the 19 teens maybe, I don't know. It's been well taken care of, it's probably been restored. Keeping it in out of the weather helps it.
Yeah. Cool.
Now this is the main shaft of the mill. Outside there was a little wheel on the outside of the building, and they could hook up a belt to a piece of machinery, and if the water was really low and in the winter when there was no water, they could still run the mill on some steam power. But this is the side that did the wheat. Upstairs above on the third floor are sifters. And then the second floor I call the meat and potatoes of the whole mill. That's where you had the roller mill, and you had the stones for the corn.
Right.
Your crown gears were wooden teeth that transferred the power from the turbine drive shafts to the mill machinery. So you can see the wooden teeth in there.
These ones here?
Yes. So basically you had your water and the turbines underneath the building. The water got in there and turned those, and it turned these teeth, and then it transferred to your belts, to your different big wheels there that went upstairs all through the building. And there's a typical little farm wagon here, and it's like a kid's corner here. They can show how they lift it up and they change the wheels. Some of the leverage. We have like 6 hands-on things. They can grind corn on the second floor. They can build a barrel on the third floor. Over here, it shows how the belts work. And then when they leave, we give them, the children, 12 and under. Or, anybody can have one, but we give them an activity book about the mill.
Oh, cool.
As a memory keepsake. We've had a lot of generous donors. This is our donor board. We never would have been able to done this with some very generous donors. Some of them up there, 25 to 49,000. There's 10,000 to 25,000, and then there's lower levels. I'm a social worker. I was able to come up with $1,000. My wife and I. But there's different levels: friend, patron, apprentice, stone dresser, and millwright. That's our different levels. And to become a life member, it's $500, and I'm also a life member too of the mill. So in addition to that, that keeps you in for being a member for the society. A really generous donation here came in recently. This is really neat. I think this came off maybe of a Huckster wagon. I've talked to several people. We were all guessing probably 1890s right in there. Basically, you'd be on the back of a wagon, and a guy would come around to your farm, and he could sift out flour, and then there was like cinnamon and different spices.
Oh, yeah.
So they could, it could have been in a store too, but I'm guessing it was probably on the back of a Huckster wagon. So they could come and do your spices or flour, whatever you needed.
Huh.
The stairs here, they came out, they're wooden pegged. So they said that when they had to lift heavy machinery, they take all the stairs out and they hoist them up through a pulley system. So they thought of everything when they built this mill. I failed to mention the three guys that came with John Adams. I started to. Samuel Weaver, he was the machinist. He was from Hamilton County, Ohio. He came out here in the early 1830s, and John brought with him John Cook. He was the carpenter. He ended up founding Cutler in 1872 later on, and then you had the miller, and his name was James Stonebreaker. He was the little giant of millers. He had a ratio of wheat to flour. People couldn't figure out he was that good. Well, he ended up leaving here, and he went into work just inside Howard County on the other side of Burlington, and he ran a mill for 50 years after he left here. And they called his place Little Giant in honor of his miller accomplishments. Everything is, like I said, there's big beams in this building that go to the width of the building here. Everything was used through a cup system. They called them elevators where you lifted it up. It started, the grain went down to the bottom, and it went all the way up to the top, which would have been the 5th floor if you count the basement, and that's where everything was cleaned, and it processed. It would come down and it would process on different areas. There's schematics over here of one of the millers had drawn this up of how it ran. There's one on each side of this. Basically, talk about the corn borders and the different cups and where everything went in the operation. This side over here is where the corn was. There's a turbine on this side that did the corn, and we were all previously on where the wheat side is. So this could do corn and wheat at the same time. And in the middle, there's the generator where they generate electricity. In the evening, this was the Wildcat Utilities Company. And so they would turn it on when it got dark, and then right before the sunrise, they would signal that the lights are going to be going out here in a few minutes. So the power is going to be going out, and they would shut it down, and then they would mill the grain all day. So the thing ran 24/7. You had electricity at night, and you had the grain during the day. And it eventually was bought out by one of the utility companies, but it ran for probably, I don't know, 20 years. One of the really neat items here is this Conestoga Wagon.
Oh, yeah.
Flat Sheets brought this up. As you can see, I'm almost 6 foot tall. That wheel's pretty close to just under 6 foot tall. This is a Conestoga Wagon, and there's not many of these left that are original. We had a guy that, when we first bought this, come out here, and he was all excited. He was from Pennsylvania. He measured it and said he was going out west to either Nebraska or Kansas to some museum. And he came back a month later and remeasured it, and he said they told him everything that he told them and showed them, and he said this was original, and he said there may be 15 left in North America.
Wow.
That are original. We have records on this. This came in it was, I think, in Kentucky in 1800, right at 1800. So this, you're talking over 225 years old.
So this is what would have gone across the Oregon Trail?
Well, actually, probably they would have, yeah, but a lot of these prairie schooners would have done that too.
Yeah.
And these are more common. There's a little later. This reminds you of the Illinois Prairie that they would have went through. But yeah, the Conestoga Wagon, some of them would have went out that way too. But These would have been made in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and they would have went over the rivers, and that would have been what they would have hauled freight. Basically your semis of the 17 and 1800s, basically your Conestoga Wagon. Yeah, families would have moved with them too.
Conestoga Wagon.
Yeah, we're real fortunate to have this. It's pretty massive.
Oh yeah.
If you had the tarp on it, which it can't fit in here, it'd be beautiful. But the size is just didn't permit it. You can see the knob and tube wiring we still used to electrify up here. Everything was up high, I guess, and to keep the rodents out of it. Here's another donation. The guy that donated the doctor buggy, he donated this. His name was Ralph Patrick. And this was sold out of Burlington, I think around 1920. So about 100 years ago, it was out of Miller Hardware in Burlington. So it's a local item. And he had it restored and donated it to us here. Really generous donation. Weber, king of all wagons. Really nice. Really generous. I mean, it's... Yeah, Burlington, that was the phone directory, and it was... Showed that, and it was one of the businesses in Burlington over 100 years ago. So we have here's one of the children's things. The conveyor shows how the belts work, so we don't have it in there, but usually there's golf balls in here and show how the grain would lift up. So the grain would fall, but the golf ball, it picks it up, and that's the concept of that. We'll go upstairs here. Whew. Actually, I opened some windows. It's not too bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be before I opened them. It's let a breeze come in.
Yeah. 110 degrees yet.
No, it's really, there's a little breeze coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, before the roller mills were in here, there were stones in here. About early 1880s. The man's name was Bishop. He was the son-in-law of Warren Adams, the son of John Adams. He had owned this in the 1880s. Actually, we had somebody in here earlier that did a tour, and he was a descendant of the Bishop, which is a descendant of John Adams. So every once in a while we have some of the Adams family come in, some of the descendants. We've had every, I didn't say the whole list of it, but we've had every owner's descendant, some descendant of every owner has been in here since we've, which is nice. Finally, College Sheets, we had one come a couple of years ago, and that was the last one. So all the rest of the families have been here. Some of it.
Yeah.
Over here is where the corn is ground. Two big stones. They're to get real close together. Claude Sheet said he knew how it was running right because it smelled like sulfur and the way it clicked together. He said if the smell was off or the clicking was off, he knew he had to make an adjustment. That's how he ran the thing. So I'm sure it was just like any other business. You get used to it and you know what needs to be adjusted by things like that. They would take these out, you hoist them out. Those are 1,000 pounds apiece. But in the 1800s, you had a guy, he was a millstone dresser, and he would have to clean and dress those stones to make them perfect operational. So that guy was itinerant. He would go to mill. It's a lost trade. But he would stay with room and board, and he would make sure to dress the stones and make them so they're working right.
Yeah.
And then we have some old wooden double log sleds, how they moved the lumber, the trees, branches. Here's an old corn cutter that they would cut corn, horse with a horse. And then it was a setup just like a factory for the rollers. You'd have different sizes or different, if you can feel them, there's different ridges in there. You can feel the difference in them. Like these are, you can feel these, and some of them are really smooth, like this one's smoother. So it'd be just like a factory setup where you would change out for your wheat, different kinds of flours. So there's several of those here. Here's another kid station over here. They can shell the corn. Once they shell it, and then we have them come over here and they can grind it, make chicken feed. Or they can use the old-fashioned native way. And of course, kids love doing both of it. And we have school tours. We try to do those. It's a little cooler in here in September. It's really hot here.
Yeah.
It's in August.
It helps.
The grain is cleaned on the machines. On the fourth floor, the grain is moved via cups and chopped or wetted, flaked over the hot rollers into material as thin as soap chips, and then ground finally to order until it's processed into the custom-made flour mill. So there would be different grain variety in different processing varieties, I should call it. Real thin or real thick, depending on the customer what they wanted. And over here's where everything was bagged. You had the big bag, or the 20, 50-pound bag, right here. So I think there's a lever that pulled. Filled up the bag, tied them in the smaller bag, or the 5 or 10-pound bag. And then they had a cart that would roll over to the doors here. Let me open these doors. Anyway, it's really humid today, huh? You'll be able to get those open. Probably use I'll have to use a pair of pliers or something. Anyway, there was a chute down to the wagons or to the trucks, and that's how you loaded everything.
Oh, from like down there, like
Yeah,
it would just, yeah.
So that's how they did it. You know, wagons early on, and then trucks later on. You said it went out of business about 1951, so you would have had trucking.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they were just a mile away from the railroad, so the railroad came in 1872, so I'm sure that there was a lot of shipping to the rail at that point. That may have increased his business. I don't know, but that'd be something to look into. There was an actual post office in this building from 1850 to 1867. It was called Wildcat Post Office. There's a list of the different postmasters all the way from 1850 until 1893, and then it went to Cutler. So it looks like there's maybe, what, 15 there, names? Hall, Witter, Kaufman, Witter did it again, Schaefer. All these people probably either worked in here too for the Warren Adams, he was the son, he was a postmaster, went to the Schaefers. There's old names from the community, Rankins. John Cook, that would have been the guy that was a carpenter.
John Cook.
Rocky.
It's like John Cook probably worked on the Yellow House down the road. Oh.
Same guy, so yeah, he was the carpenter. He probably worked in here, you know.
Yeah.
There'd be times where he just needed, he was probably getting up in age. Maybe he would decide to be a postmaster at that point. And Warren Adams did it again there, and then he did it several times. Then John Penn, it's like the last one there, he was a storekeeper. He had a store in town. It's like he was postmaster for a little while. And then Charles Adams was the grandson of John Adams. He was our last postmaster here in 1894.
Cool.
So here's the post office, and this is actually Now the old Cutler post office. This isn't original here, but it was kind of nice to have that donated here. In the town of Cutler, just a mile away. And then here's some old-fashioned cubby holes. I don't know. Possible it was something like that. I have no idea. But you know, there's a reproduction sign up there at the post office. And here's a picture of Samuel Weaver, the machinist I talked about earlier. He ended up starting a woolen mill in G-Town, down where Cutler is, and Prince William. He had a woolen mill. So, but he lived to almost, who was he, 97 when he passed, 96 or 97. So nobody really interviewed that man, and it's too bad because think of the history he could have told us. He got here in the early 1830s and died in 1903.
Almost 100 years old.
So he is, there's a picture of him, and there's also a picture here of the miller, James Stonebreaker. He worked for here from 1836 to 1846. And then he went to Stonebreaker Mill, which I think he ran that, he maybe was in there in the 1880s, maybe his family had, I think it closed around 1900, so.
I'll try to get focus there.
But that was, so we have two of the three men that set up this mill. We don't have a picture of John Cook or John Adams. And actually here's a picture of his mill in 1913, the Stonebreaker Mill. It was over by Burlington. It flooded, and at that point, I think it was done. I think it was over with. Same flood that hit here came down here.
And this is down
there, yeah.
This is down by the.
Yeah, the 1913. It would have been up by closer to, on the other side of Burlington, about 12 miles away from here.
Oh, okay.
And then here's a picture of Madeline Shin. He was the first Burlington Township trustee. He had a mill also. He had a mill in Burlington, but it was a sawmill in the 1850s in Burlington called the Shin Mill. It ended up becoming a flour mill later on. But he was he named the town of Burlington. That was a big mystery I looked into, and on the internet it says Wyandotte Burlington is the name for it. Well, that's Peter Cornstalk, and there were 3 Peter Cornstalks. That's all a legend. Mr. Shin was from Burlington Township, Burlington, New Jersey. That's where his family was, his dad, and he had cousins living there in the 1830s. He came from Virginia, so it was kind of hard to follow, and but that's the only person who did the research. Anybody in the 1830s, that was the only person that was from Burlington Township, New Jersey, and it was named Wildcat Post Office there, and there's confusion there because this later on was called Wildcat Post Office in 1850, but 1832, it was called Wildcat Post Office in Burlington, and 9 days before they named Burlington, on May 29, 1833, they changed the name to Burlington Post Office, and that's how it got its name. Oh. But originally, this was Burlington Township until 1835, and so the first township meetings out here in this yellow house out here. There's some old hand. I think it's raining out there.
Yeah, it just sort of rained out of nowhere.
There's corn shellers in here that are part of the mill. Some of this has been added, like from farms. Some of the wheat, hand crank wheat machines. But there's grain cleaners and there's corn shellers over there that were actually hooked up to the mill as part of that. And some of this has been donated from farms. We'll head upstairs. So this is a big building, big barn.
Ooh. Ooh, my shit. It's a little dark up here.
Yeah, there's only one way. This was where they sifted the grain, the flour. Now we're into the lodge. There was a lodge in this building, a Masonic lodge from the early 1860s. And it was after John Adams has passed. Warren Adams became part of the lodge here. And it was also a schoolroom. So I'm sitting on pews. These pews came out of the Wheeling Church, Wheeling, Indiana. It was tore down years ago, and so they brought the pews in here. which is a nice donation. But there's school equipment in here, and there's lodge equipment. So they do it once a year. They do a historic lodge meeting in here. So it's an actual operating lodge historically in here, which is nice. Nice that it's used for things like that. So this would have been partitioned. It looks like years ago it probably was a door. And after the lodge, they probably just took it out, the partition. But here you're on the 3rd floor in the lodge. I don't think they would have trouble with any kind of being in, with the windows or anything. So being on the 3rd floor. But it's nice that it's part of the history. So it wasn't in here very long. They built a post office. I think they built the post office and the lodge in one building here in town in 1867. Well, the railroad came through a mile away here and went through Cutler in 1872. So about 5 years that building was here. And I've heard stories from many people over the years that their great-great-granddad or their great-grandparents told them that they moved that building so far, and it took them like almost a year to get that building all the way to Cutler. They would only move it so far, so they had to get their mail like, several hundred yards away, and then they would move another 700. So they must have just moved it when they had time or the ability to do it. But it took almost a year to move that post office to Cutler.
Oh, yeah.
So, you hear all these stories, and it's got to be true, because why would they say something like that? But yeah, that was one of the buildings that was in town, and that building's not in Cutler anymore. It's been gone for a long time. There was a Cutler Lodge there until, I don't know, it's not been gone how long, maybe 25 years ago, I don't know, but it was in operation, but no, there's no longer a lodge in Cutler. But this is, of the area, you had a lot of lodges, all the little towns. This was a little town, so you got to think, how much smaller of a town can you get than, 4 or 5 houses, a couple buildings. So here's some of the belts and some of the machinery. Miss Rankin was the name of the teacher. She taught here 1 year, and it was during 1863, and I think what happened, maybe the school had burnt. In 1863 was right in the midst of the Civil War, so maybe there wasn't enough men here to build the schoolhouse, and maybe that's why they did a term up here.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, having a school.
School and
a flour mill.
Flour. Yeah.
I bet that was noisy. I wonder how they did that. I wonder if they waited certain times of the day or whatever.
Yeah, I'd say it'd probably be hard to really teach over all that noise.
There's all kinds of antiques. This is kind of empty. I was told a miller had come here from South Carolina right after we bought this, and he was all excited. And he was showing me that there was like 4 more pieces of equipment that sat here. He said this was a high-capacity mill. And he showed me up here, they said it was called a transfer shaft. There was a belt that went from here to here.
Oh.
And it ran this other machinery. So there was another belt, this is gone now, and it transferred another belt here, so there would have been more machinery set in here. And he was really excited. He said this was high capacity. And then we have others, the old barber chairs, and we have like meat saws and apple cider presses and maple sugar cans. Just things that farmers would have had. Might be able to get a view here. This door opens, so we gotta keep it locked. That'll have some light in here.
Hey, got some light.
They'll give you a view of
Oh, yeah.
the outside.
This be a flag?
Yeah, we'll have this open sometimes during the festival. We'll have a flag out. And the lighting in here, they're reproduction bulbs, but they're the time period era. We try to keep those like that.
Oh yeah.
Those are reproduction. There is a couple of them that are actually original, but these aren't.
Yeah, it's, you can get those at like Menards or.
Yeah, they sell those.
Yep, that's all I have for.
So we kind of keep it looking antique looking in here.
It's cool.
Yeah, you're free to go upstairs. The beams are low. It's dark up there.
Yeah.
That's where everything
okay.
was clean. But if you just walk to the top, you can see how big that attic is. It is huge. It's hot up there. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, should have brought my flashlight. Yeah.
If I keep this door open, you might be able to. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see or not.
Here's the
But
wheel.
yeah, it's part of that transfer shaft.
Huh. Let's see if I can get a little bit of it to pick up
See how
here.
big the building is.
Oh yeah.
That's just the attic. That's bigger than most houses.
It is a big attic. Oh yeah. Let's get the window over here. Incredible place, so there's a lot of history here. There's a wheel that would have been used. Well, I'll get a shot from down there because the window's kind of blurring it out. But this wheel down here was used on the Wildcat Creek River. It was used as a power, used on the mill. Cool. Yep. Adams Mill.
The last miller's nephew, they didn't have any children, neither Dewey nor Claude, but his nephew came, a couple years ago, and he told me that for 50 cents, every snake he could find, Claude would give him 50 cents, and he would bring the snakes up here to get all the rodents.
Oh.
And so he said in the 40s, that was a lot of money for a little kid, 50 cents a snake.
Yeah.
And so he would get as many as he could and bring them up. That was one of the stories I remember him telling me. But that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Get out looking for snakes.
Right.
Up here.
Good way to make money.
To get the rodents. Here's David Long. So there's a bag we don't have. There's different ones along here that have been stamped. I think there's a Schaefer too. So there would have been a David Long something, wheat, flour,
Okay.
farm feed, whatever. We don't have it, so we don't know. But there's other ones stamped all through the building. I think there's a Schaefer. Here's Adams wheat, white wheat. So they were just playing around, getting the stenciling, testing it probably to see. But there's throughout the building, I know there's a Schaefer too. Seen.
Schaefer.
Now it's raining.
Ah, yeah, there it is. Some greens, oats.
You see something different in here every time you look. You see these massive beams. They were cut certain ways, I guess, to prevent fires. I had a guy tell me that's why they etched them that way, so in case there was a fire, it wouldn't burn.
Really?
That's why they shaped them like that.
What would stop the fire from doing that? Is it just the angle?
The angle, yeah, he seemed to know what he was talking about.
Huh.
Here's another, what's that say? Extra something wheat. Extra fine, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read.
It's faded over the years, and there was something over here too, but you can't read that anymore. You see the O, and I got both these numbers up here. imagine in the early 1880s, these were probably modern machinery out here in the middle of nowhere. I'm sure Mr. Warren Adams was really, or Bishop, I guess was the one that put him in, would have been really happy.
Yeah.
You could make different varieties of flour that way. Probably could have done it the other way, but I bet it was a lot harder by stone.
So, yeah.
Had the stone with different rollers. That would be your setup.
Alright.
Somebody told me this was an ionization. It was run by electricity and it bleached the flour through electricity. Ionization, what would you call it, a motor?
It's like ionization.
It bleached the flour. I don't know what this is. There's a window here and I don't know if that's, they would look at it coming through this window maybe. See me. I don't know.
It's interesting.
They had all kinds of different pieces of machinery in here. I'll head on back so we can look around and take some more if you need to. Phew. You know, it's not as hot as I thought it was going to be.
Get some shots from down here in the basement. See, this is where the waterway gone through the mill and would have gone through that wheel right there. And that was what would have generated the power to it. And I think someday they want to get that back in operation to where they can use the water, the power of water to use the mill.